yeet.
I don't want to see any computers on, so close your computers. Close your computers. There's a computer over there.
Oh, that's got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you guys done with these?
You took my copy. Big foot.
You starting or? Just gonna get some water real quick.
I can't read anything you write. What is you on the page?
All right. Okay, 1, 2, 3, begins.
What is holding back nuclear energy, and how can we solve the issue? By Dash Gardner, Christian Hu, Caden Stillwagon, and Alex Tabasoli. Before we can start this presentation off, I'd just like to first discuss what is nuclear energy. So, nuclear energy is the process of splitting atomic nuclei to convert it into energy for human use. And there are two kinds, fission and fusion. Next. As you can see, nuclear energy, it produces 0 carbon emissions, according to the CDC, and it's currently the most efficient power of all power sources in America, producing 91% of its maximum power capacity. Next slide. So 31 countries in the world right now currently have access to nuclear power or have nuclear power plants built. Next slide. But only 2 of them have nuclear power account for at least 50% of their power draw. This is France and another Scandinavian country in Europe. Next slide. So 2 countries, they use nuclear power. So why, if it's so good, why is it not being used? Well, as you can see here, it started off in the 70s and it's been on a gradual incline until about 2012 when the Fukushima nuclear meltdown incident happened, where it had a steep drop in 2014 and it's been slowly rising up since then. But it's still not reached its maximum capacity, and 2014 is its lowest level since 1998. Next slide. Further on, this quote from The Economist, an article written by The Economist about nuclear power in 2014, says that barring major technological developments, nuclear power will continue to be a creature of politics, not economics. It's not at all being held back by its own power draw or by its own ability to do something. It's being held back by political implication and public unrest due to safety concerns. Next slide. So our overall problem is nuclear energy is being held back by public unrest due to safety concern, as well as low cost but more environmentally damaging carbon-based fuel sources.
Our first solution is to implement strict designs and safety protocols to ease the public safety concerns. One way to increase the safety of nuclear power is by using molten salt reactors. Next slide. Is by using molten salt reactors in the production of nuclear energy. As said by ZME Science, MSRs are walk-away safe due to the fact that they cannot melt down as their saline fluid combines both the fuel and the coolant, and if the fuel were to overheat, it would simply drain down a freeze plug, which melts when the fuel becomes too hot. Also, these reactors are not susceptible to terrorist attacks, as they are kept at atmospheric pressures, so they would simply leak, cool, and solidify without ever releasing any radiation. Next slide. Thorium is a uranium-like element that is commonly used in the fuel of molten salt reactors. According to Lightbridge, a nuclear energy company that specializes in nuclear fuel, says that thorium-based fuel allows for safe operation of nuclear power plants during normal and off-normal scenarios. The thorium-based fuel has improved thermal physical properties compared to uranium fuels, which provide more reliable fuel performance during reactor operation. The lower operating temperatures and higher thermal conductivity of thorium fuel lead to increased safety margins during off-normal and accidental scenarios. Next slide. The strengths of this solution include that there is a lower chance of meltdown, the MSRs are not susceptible to terrorist attacks, and thorium is prolific in nature, safer to mine, cheaper, and better for the environment as it is able to be reused. The weaknesses of this solution include the corrosion risk of MSR due to using salt, the production of tritium, which is highly radioactive and mobile, and the startup of MSRs would be very costly, and a modified MSR might be able to produce nuclear-grade nuclear material. Next slide. The implications of this would be to build these molten salt reactors in place of the current nuclear reactors to ease the public safety concerns. A limitation that comes with this is that according to terrestrial energy, even a small 190 megawatt molten salt reactor costs around $1 billion to build. Next, Christian will explain our second solution of creating a carbon tax.
Solution number 2 is placing a carbon tax on the top carbon-producing industries to increase the competition between fossil fuel energy resources and nuclear energy. Next slide. So what is a carbon tax? So a carbon tax is a Pigouvian tax, which is a government cost on activities that could possibly be harmful socially or environmentally. A perfect example of this would be pollution. So for example, a company that creates a lot of pollution is taxed a certain amount of money depending on how much pollution they create. So that money that they're taxed on is then put back in to reverse the effects of that pollution. It's for the cleanup. And it also reflects the costs, their external costs for the damage they've created to the environment. And also for consumers, the consumers are taxed for their extra costs when they pay for fossil fuels. Next slide. Okay, this graph by the International Energy Agency explicitly shows how without a carbon tax, fossil fuel resources are used way more than nuclear energy, compared to the graph on the right where it shows with the tax, fossil fuels are used way less and nuclear energy is used way more as a result of companies being more fuel efficient. Because when the carbon tax is used, fossil fuels cost more, and it's just more obvious and to use nuclear energy. Next slide. The pros of this are that it increases the competition, allowing more use of nuclear energy and less use of carbon production. And also, consumers will become more fuel efficient because it's more expensive, therefore causing a boost in economic growth. The cons are obviously energy will be way more expensive, specifically fossil fuels. So gas prices will be a lot more. And lastly, it's really hard to measure the amount of carbon emissions. Therefore, tax evasion is very easy. It's very common to happen in this situation. For companies, it's really easy for companies to lie about how much carbon they're producing. And this solution alone will not be the only way to solve the problem with carbon emissions. And the implications are, in the future, if carbon tax is used, there will be an immense decrease in carbon emissions. And limitations to this is consumers and companies will have to pay much higher costs for energy, which will cause lots of disagreement among citizens regarding the carbon tax.
So, in conclusion, we decided that the carbon tax would be a better option. So, a carbon tax, as said by Christian, will advocate for clean energy, which includes nuclear energy, as it doesn't produce any carbon emissions. And all the plumes you see is just steam rising up from the cooling towers. And it's comparatively very clean to fossil fuels such as coal and oil power plants. Also, compared to other renewable energy sources like solar energy, which is insanely inefficient, nuclear energy is very efficient and will be able to produce lots of power. So many people already support a carbon tax, but they don't realize that it also supports nuclear energy. So once they know it supports nuclear energy, so more people could jump on the board to this, because there will be much more power production. People will be, I think, much more on board with the carbon tax. And the extra safety measures really do not justify the high price tag if we use molten salt reactors, as the only thing it will accomplish is really just easing people's minds.